Hi everyone, my name is Olivia and we're here with another painting class. We're going to do a little mountainscape here, a little bit of northern lights kind of stuff at the top. And I really wanted to do this painting because I know a lot of the winter themed paintings usually happen before Christmas, kind of in that holiday wintry season. And everybody forgets about this whole, January, February, March left months that we still have of winter. And so I'm a fan of the snow. I know that's kind of a controversial thing, especially in Kentucky. I'm from New York. So to be away from the snow is different for me, so I just wanted to bring a little bit of that back. So the first thing we're going to do today is we're going to be mixing some colors. We want them to be all ready when we go to put them on, because this painting is going to be a lot of wet on wet paint. Usually we'll do a layer, let it dry, we'll do a layer, let it dry, but all this top kind of background part, we're going to be kind of mixing the colors into each other. Same thing with this, the bottom and the mountains here. So we want all of our paints ready to go when we need them. As always, we're going to have a fresh canvas. We have our cup of water to rinse our brushes. We have a paper towel or rag. If you have a rag this time, I might go with a rag, or you might use a few more paper towels than normal. We're going from really, really dark to very light colors, so either have a rag with you so you can squeeze off that excess paint, or make sure you wash your brushes really well this time. So we have our palette or our paper plate or whatever we put our paint in. We have our blow dryer. We'll probably use it once or twice. So have that ready, or like I always say, if you just want to take a break, when I go to blow dry, give it 5-10 minutes and you should be good to go. And a variety of brushes. So we're gonna need, I'll say 2 main brushes today. So something in the 1 to 3 inch range that we can do kind of big, broader strokes with. And then we're gonna want one smaller brush. It's one little detail brush. We have a couple of these real small, I'm going to say trees back here, a little bit stylized, so we don't have to worry about making individual branches or leaves or anything. But have a smaller brush that we can do that with. If you have a variety of brushes, we'll grab something in the medium range too. It can be round or flat, it doesn't matter. To do these bigger trees if you want. You can do them with your smaller brush, but it might take you a little bit longer. So if you have kind of a medium-sized brush, you can do that. Another tip that I have is that if you have 2 bigger brushes, so I have like 2 identical brushes of this size, then I would say use them both. Keep one as a, I'll say, light colored brush and one as a dark colored brush. So instead of doing all this black up here and then having to rinse it and try to put some light orange on it, it might get muddy. So I would say designate one as your dark color brush and one as your light color brush. That'll make it a little bit easier when you're trying to rinse and get new colors and all of that. So we'll take our palette. I'm going to keep these 2 over here because I definitely need those. I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to take out just one of my smaller old brushes just to mix with, because if you try to mix with the big brushes, sometimes it gets all gunked up in here and it sucks up all the paint that you need. So sometimes I'll mix with a smaller brush. And of course I just have my kind of my primaries here, my black, my white, my yellow, red, and blue. I have 2 different blues here. So I think this time I used ultramarine, yeah. But again, if you have ultramarine or this phthalo blue, you could use either one. Both will make purple. And so that's what we're going to start with. We're going to start with a purple. We're going to mix a purple, a pink, and an orange. And that's going to make up our whole scene here. Just those 3 colors, purple, pink, orange, and then some black and white. So for this purple, you can make it whatever shade you like better. If you like a grape purple more, you can definitely use that. Oh, my red just exploded. It's okay. But what I did for this particular painting was I did a very blue leaning purple. So if you like this kind of indigo looking color that I kind of have throughout mine, you're going to mix up a purple that's very, very blue heavy. So I'll say 90% blue, just throw 10% red in there, mix that up, we'll see what we get. But again, if you like a different shade better, feel free to make it your own. This also would look really nice if you wanted to do tones of blue and maybe like a bright, bright green. I think that's what a lot of people think of when they think of Northern Lights, that kind of electric green. So if you like those tones, I'll say blue, electric green, and maybe some yellow. If you wanted to kind of change up the whole color scheme of this, that would look nice too. Whatever you think. Okay, we'll see how well you can see this. So it's very much leaning on the blue side. It's a very blue heavy purple here. So we have that. We're going to mix up a pink. So again, we're going to take some of our red, just a tiny bit. Pinks take very little red to make. A little bit of red, lots of white. You can always add more red if you need, but it's hard to mix it through if you have too much red. You're going to end up having to put too much white into it, and you're going to end up with a huge pile of paint, and you really only need a little tiny bit for this. So don't use too much red. If you need to put it in its own separate pile, that's okay too. Again, I'm just taking one of these old little watercolor brushes that comes with like kid sets. Don't throw those out, they're good for mixing. So I'm going to mix up my pink here. Again, if you like a real dark, rich pink, a little bit more red, you can certainly do that. I made mine's kind of I'll say a bubblegum pink. It's got some heft, it's definitely not, it's darker than a pastel pink, definitely. So let's try that here. Because the pink is sort of our transition color between the dark and the sky. So we have the black on top, we have a layer of purple, pink, and then orange. So pink is kind of our transition color between like the cools and the warms. The purple being our cool color, the orange being our warm color. So we want something that's going to stand up to that purple. So I have my pink there. And then we'll go ahead and do our orange. And so for the sake of not having to clean the brush, I'm just going to take this same brush. I'm going to throw some yellow in the little tub, or the little crater here that I had my red in. And I'm going to make an orange. The orange that I have up there is, it's almost like a creamsicle type orange. Okay, so I don't have quite enough red here. I'll add a tiny bit more. Again, be gentle with the red. A little bit goes a long way, especially because yellow is a very light color too, just like we did with the pink. Okay, so I have that orange there. It's a little bit darker. It's a little bit darker than the one that I have up here. I might add a little bit of white to it. just to lighten it up a little bit more. I don't want it to dominate the sky there, so if you feel like your orange came out too dark, you can definitely add a little bit of white to it. Of course, you can leave it darker if you like the darker tone. That's okay too. Another thing though that we're going to add to our background is we are going to put in some streaks of white. It's going to break up those color fields a little bit. So you can see here, 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 we have little bits of white running throughout. So if you're on the fence, if you're not sure, you know, you're like, yeah, I guess my orange looks okay, maybe it's a little dark. If it's just a little bit dark, it's fine. We'll put a little bit of white into it on the canvas. There we go. This was a little too dark for me though. We'll fix this guy while we're still in the pot over here. So let's see if you can tell the difference here. So this is the orange that I'm going to use, and this is the original one that I mixed up. It's a little bit dark, but it looks all good now. All right, and so those are the colors that you're going to need. Purple, pink, orange. We're off and running. I'm going to, let's see, stick these brushes back here, just so we can see. All right, so I'm going to take my black. As always, we're going to start in the background. We move our way to the foreground. And the most important thing that I wanted to focus on, if I can get this open, for this painting was perspective. Most everything that we do in these classes has perspective. There's almost always a distinct background, middle ground, and foreground. But I think what is most important to this painting is making sure that it looks like this is a vast landscape. I mean, I want it to look like the little trees back here are miles and miles away. And there's a couple tricks that we do in here to make it seem like that. So, of course, like I pointed out, some of these trees are just, when it gets down to these little specks here, that's just what they are. They are specks. They're tiny little dots. They're not tree-shaped. They're not triangular. It just kind of boils down to being little spots. And those are going to contrast with these ones that are in the middle ground. They're kind of mid-size. And they're going to contrast with these bigger ones on the left. So there you're really seeing a big size difference, which is going to help our perspective a little bit. The kind of northern lights thing that we have going on here also creates a little bit of perspective, because you can see it kind of travels from this, which I'm going to say is the background, to up here, which is the foreground. So that gives you a little length this way too. And another thing that gives us a little bit of length and a bigger field of view is going to be the curve here. And so that might have seemed like just a nonchalant choice, but that curvature of the colors in the sky is really what's going to make it look like you're looking at almost a panoramic picture. I don't know if you've ever seen on Discovery Channel or, you know, Nat Geo, any of those, when they do those huge panoramic pictures of the sky, the nighttime sky, those kind of time-lapse ones. It's such a wide frame that it captures kind of like the curvature of the earth there. And so that's kind of what we're going for here. I know it seems super conceptual, but it's really just, it looks like you're capturing a bigger frame when it's curved than when it is flat. So we'll use that to our advantage here. Another advantage to us here is that we can be a little, I don't want to say sloppy, but we can be a little interpretive here. In our sky, in our stars, our little splatters, if you get a big chunk here and there, which I know happens sometimes when people do the little splatter paint, that's okay, because we're actually going to do that on purpose up here, and that's how we're going to get our little star trails. The same thing with down here. This color field at the bottom where the snow is pretty loose. It doesn't need to look exactly like mine. In fact, I'll try to do a different one on this canvas purposefully so that, you know, you can see The variety is fine. You don't need to try to recreate mine exactly. And so let's jump right in here. So I put some black in my palette. I'm going to put a little white in my palette too, just because I'll need it eventually. So I have my 3 mixed colors, I have my black, and I have my white. I have 2 big brushes again. I'm going to do a dark brush and a light brush. And so we're first going to start out with our dark brush. We are going to load up our brush with black. Again, this is like a maybe 1 to 3 inch brush, whatever you got. And we're going to start to load up this top area. And so you are just going to fill the top, I'll say third in black. But remember, we're keeping that space that we're going to fill in curved. So this is where we're going to start to make that curve. And that's going to carry through the rest of the painting. So make sure you get your top, make sure you get anywhere on the side where it overlaps. And we always want to overlap our colors, so bring the black down maybe a little bit farther than you think you want to see it on the canvas, and the purple is going to blend into it a little bit. You don't have to worry about having, I'll say, a rough edge on the bottom. The purple is going to fall right into that. We're going to blend. In fact, if you want to do a couple of these, make your edge irregular, that's okay. Okay. First step done. We have the beginnings of our sky. Now I'm going to rinse this off. I'm still going to use this same brush, this brush that I designated as my dark color brush. I'm going to use that for the purple also, because the purple is pretty dark. So I rinsed it off as best as I could. With the black, you're still going to, have some in there. Unless you want to take it over to the sink and rinse it really, really well. But with the purple, it's not totally necessary. It's got a little bit of black on there, that's okay. And so again, we're going a little bit fast with this background because we want this paint to stay wet while we're mixing our other colors in. So right away, we're going to go into our purple, and we're going to do just the same thing. We're going to keep in mind that we're keeping that curve in here. We're going to work some of this purple up into our black. Big, long brush strokes back and forth. And so what we don't really want to do here is we don't want to blur the 2 colors together so that it's a transmission, or transition, not transmission. We don't want, I'll say, a smooth transition. We kind of want you to be able to see streaks of the different colors in one another. So no need to blend the 2 colors together. They're kind of going to sit on top of and next to each other. So we want these nice big stripes in it. We want our black and our purple to get along, but we don't want them to swallow each other, if that makes any sense at all. And again, this bottom edge, you can kind of send little strokes here and here, or here and there, down. That's going to help that pink kind of integrate. At this point, we're just about touching halfway down the canvas. If that gives you kind of an estimate of where we should be on the canvas. But again, if it's a little bit longer, then that's okay. If you like the pink and orange area of the canvas more and you want more of that, then take this a little shorter. It's all up to you. and your specific canvas. Okay, so right now I'm going to ditch this brush. I'm going to take my light color brush because I'm going to use this for the pink and the orange and for our little white highlights. So this one I'm going to throw in my water. I'm going to go into my pink. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay a little bit of the color down without touching the purple. I'm going to not overlap right away because, again, the purple is still wet. And you do want them to exist next to one another. So you don't want them to mix too much. Again, I'm not blending like crazy. We're creating some variety back and forth. You can pull some up into this purple if you want. All right, and I think that's where I'm going to stop for my pink. Again, we don't want to over mix. We just want them integrated. All right, and on to our orange. So I'm gonna get this pink off. We'll rinse this light colored brush. And we'll go into our orange. And so no need to go all the way to the bottom with this. We're going to be covering with our snow and our mountains. So if you have a couple inches at the bottom that are not covered, that's okay. I would say the most important part is to follow up with these higher edges. Your left and your right side are going to be higher than your middle because we have that kind of curve in our sky. So just make sure you're getting to the side here as much as you want. Imagine where your snow is going to start. So the same way we did with our pink, same way that we did with our purple. We're going to work this orange in. Okay. And now we're going to throw in some of our highlights. So we're going to clean our brush just a little bit. I'm going to just squeegee off kind of the excess paint on here. And I'm going to grab a little bit of my white. And I'm going to incorporate this white, again, just in little streaks. They can remain there. They don't need to blend in entirely. We're just giving a little variety here. Making it look a little more sky-like. And you always can go back to another color that we've done and add onto it because all of your colors as of right now should be pretty wet still. So if you're looking at this and I'm like, ooh, there's not really that much pink in there, I want more pink, I can rinse my brush, go ahead and I can add some more pink back into the top. If you feel like your purple kind of crept down too much, you can add a little more orange, a little white up here, whatever you feel like it needs. If you love it just the way it is, then take my advice and stop messing with it because that's the hardest part in art, is knowing when to stop. So these little white highlights can come up here into the pink, into the purple. Still keeping in mind that curve. I'm going to take my own advice and stop working on this because I think it looks good. I like what we're doing so far. Okay, so here's that point we're going to take a pause. We're going to blow dry just the bottom here. Is important for us to blow dry. We're going to be putting in the mountains and the snow on the bottom. So we want this part where it's going to overlap to be dry. You can dry the top if you want. You don't need to at this time. It's just going to take you a couple more minutes. But that's not a huge focus right now. Also, I used up my whole paper towel. Like I said, you're going to need a lot for this painting. It was specifically for that background part. So if you have a little bit left, just stick with that if you need to grab a refill. Or if you need to rinse out your water if it's looking black and very dark. We're going to be using some white this time. So if you need to give both of your brushes like a really good wash in the sink and then come back, you can do that. If you have an excess of brushes and you want to just use different ones, then you can do that. So we'll take a break here, we'll blow dry, we'll clean our brushes, and then we'll come right back. Okay, we're back. We are rinsed, we're dried, we are restocked. And so we will continue. We're going to do a little bit of white outlining here on our ground and our mountains. And then we're going to shift up into our star areas. So we want a nice clean brush. Make sure when you're drying, you dry it downwards so all the water can rinse out of this, sometimes gets stuck in that metal part. You don't want any water really mixing with your white paint because white paint already is kind of transparent, so you don't want to wash it down at all. So try to make sure this is dry as well as you can get it. If the bristles kind of fluff out like that, you're pretty much good. Alright, so at this point we're going to be outlining our landscape. And like I said, this part's pretty interpretive. It doesn't need to look just like mine. We're going to ignore the mountains for now. We're just going to be doing this kind of horizon line. Sorry, I forgot the word. We're going to be just outlining our horizon now. We're going to paint the whole thing white just to cover up any of this orange that we're overlapping. So let's go ahead and do this. So you want this bottom snowy area to cover, I'm going to say maybe a quarter of your canvas. But again, if you like the snow, you can do a little bit more. If you're not a huge fan of this bottom part, if you want the emphasis to be on the sky, you can definitely do that. We're just making a squiggly line here at the bottom. We're doing some little hills and valleys and such. We don't want any big dramatic mountains or hills in the front. We're going to leave that for the back. So just some variety in this like little hillscape right here. Alright. And so we just want to make sure that white is covering up most of that orange that we have. We're going to go back over it with a second layer, but make sure you give it at least one good layer for now. Okay, and let me grab a little more white paint. We're going to do just the same thing with the mountains now. So we're just going to do an outline. We're not going to worry about any of those colors. So I'm sticking again with my bigger brush. There's no right or wrong way to do these. They're just going to be some triangular peaks over here. They can go off the side of your page like this. You can do one big mountain peak if you like. You can do two small ones. You can do a whole smaller mountain range. and let ourselves be creative here. And again, we're just filling these in. It doesn't need to be completely solid, but we'll give it a good first layer here. Okay. Looks a little deserty right now, but it'll look like snow when we're done, I promise. Okay, so we're going to switch gears for a second. We're going to stick with our white paint. But what we're going to do is make some of these little star-like splatters up here, and if you can see better, maybe a little closer. It's a little hard with the light. Ooh, that's good. Okay, so you can see we're really speckled in here. We have a lot of little tiny specks from when we're kind of splattering our paint on here. And so if you haven't done that before, if you have missed any classes that I've done that have done the splatter paint, then we'll do a little recap here. If you have any kind of old crusty brush, don't throw those away. Those are great for things like this. So any of these, if you look when I do this, I mean, this one is stuck. It's old and it's janky. I would never use this to paint something smooth like this because it would come out all streaky and gross. But these are really useful for doing things like we're about to do right now. If you have a big fluffy brush, you can use that. There's two different ways to do this. A lot of other people will dip the brush in paint and they will just use their thumb and they'll kind of rake over the bristles, and that will kind of splatter the paint on there, but then you get your whole hand gets covered in paint. So you can definitely do that if you want. If that has worked better for you, you can go ahead and do that. Like I said, you can always pause the video, do what you want to do, wash up, and then come back. So feel free to do that. The other thing that I like to do is I'll take some of my white paint and I will water it down. So I'll put a little bit of the white paint in one of these pots. I'll take some of my brush water from over here and mix it in so it's more liquid, so it's not as stiff as the regular paint. And I'll use that on the end of a long brush like this one. And I'll take my finger like this and I will tap my brush against it, and that will cause the splatters on here. So you're just tapping the paint and it's gonna come off the end like that in little tiny splatters. The only thing you want to make sure is that you don't get too much paint on the end of your brush. You don't want to like scoop it up and go like this because then you'll have like a bug splatter. Do just a little tiny bit on your brush at a time. The less paint you do, the more small splatters you'll get. And we want those on here for the little stars. And a bonus is you don't get the paint all over your fingers. So I might put my canvas down to do that so I don't splatter my closets up here. But whatever method you like the best, we're going to start with just some stars in the background. We're not going to worry about this whole thing that we have up here. We're just doing some basic stars here. So let me grab some water, just using my brush, scooping some of it. And I'm going to take a little of my white paint. I'm going to mix it right in. I can't tip it and show you, that's how liquid it is, if that helps at all. Alright, and so I'm going to squeeze as much off of this brush as I can. And I'm going to set this down. So I'll do some and then I'll show you. So again, I'm using my finger, I'm tapping down, a little bit more, and it does jump a little bit. The paint doesn't go like directly down onto the canvas, so don't do this with your favorite shirt on, don't do it on a really nice tablecloth. Just be aware that you might get some splatters in places that you're not anticipating them in. And the less paint you have on your brush, the more little tiny stars you'll get here. So don't feel like you have to keep dipping and keep dipping. And I'm doing more stars up in kind of the black area. They can kind of come down a little bit into your purple and your pink and your orange. So that's kind of the part of the sky that's lighter, so you're not going to see those stars as much in theory. So we'll take a look at this. So that was just dipping my brush 2 times. I get all of that. So it doesn't take a lot of paint, not a lot at all. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to stick that one in the water. And so we're going to let those hang out for just a minute. And we're going to come back down to our bottom area. And so now is the time on our bottom that we're going to start to, I was going to say mold the landscape, but that sounds a little bit kitschy. So we're going to start to add a little bit of texture to our landscape, I'll say. And so in general, what we're going to do is we want the bottom to be a little darker than the top. We want our valleys to be a little bit darker than our peaks. I don't know if anyone who's watching is into makeup. When you contour something, you want the lower parts of your face or of your painting to be the ones with the shadows, and you want the higher parts to be the highlights. And so let's look over here. So on the tops of my, I know you can't really see with the trees, but on the tops of my little hills here is mostly where I have my white. I have a little bit in here as maybe another hill. But if you look, it kind of dips down in here, and I have my purple in there because that's kind of a valley, it's a shadow. So we're going to do a little bit of dark in the dips and more of the light on the tops. Of course, it's not a hard and fast rule. This is a very stylized painting, so you know, don't get real obsessed with this, but if you want a general rule of thumb, especially if your landscape looks different than mine and you can't put the dark paint exactly where I'm putting it, if you need to figure that out for your own, I'll say a general rule is you're going to stick the darker paint in the parts that are lower, and you're going to stick the white paint on the parts that are higher. So let's try that. So I'm going to start with my white. We're going to be doing the white and the purple. But I'm going to start with my white since it's the lighter color. And I'm going to go over my outline again. I don't want any of that orange to show through. So I'm going to give it a once over so that A, none of the orange shows through, and so that B, our purple will blend nicely. So I'm going to cover this whole bottom part in white. And then I'm going to start with my purple. I'm going to keep this same brush. I'm going to dip just a little bit to purple. You don't need to go crazy right away. But I'm going to kind of come into my lower areas here. And I'm going to start to put in my purple. You'll see this purple goes a long way because the white is so light. Let's see, maybe down here. On the very bottom, I'm going to do lots of nice dark purple. I want this down here to be super rich. I'm going to do the same over on this side. Some nice dark purple in here. And so let's see, a few things that can happen. Your dark purple can absolutely dominate this bottom part because it is so much darker than this white. So what you're gonna do, if you feel like you need to, we'll take a clean, dry brush, and you're gonna use this to blend. And that'll kind of stop the purple. You can even take a little more white if you need. And that's going to allow you to blend the purple, but it's gonna stop it from spreading so much because that other brush that we have is now covered in purple, so it's gonna spread it. But if we're doing the kind of light brush, dark brush thing again, we'll keep this one a little cleaner. You can even, I'm not wiping it on my pants, I promise, I have an apron on. But if you want to keep one a little cleaner or a little more loaded with your white, and you want to keep one as more of a purple brush, that might help you with this shading in here. Alright, I'll put that one down. I'll pick back up my dark brush because I want to do a little dark area in here. Maybe I want this to be a little darker. This to be a little darker. So I'll kind of apply with my dark brush, and then I'll blend with my light brush, if that makes sense. And of course, always feel free to ask questions if you're doing this video and you're just like, Olivia, that makes no sense. That's okay. Let me know and I can help, or I can try to make suggestions. So we don't want to blend this in too much. We want our darks to be dark and we want our lights to be light. If the purple has taken over your tops of your mountains, your highlighted area, go ahead and put it right back in. No harm, no foul. All right. I think we just about have it. All right. Look at that, we went from sand to snow. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and take my light brush. I'm gonna make sure, if I have any big globs of purple on my lighter brush, I'm gonna kind of just squeegee those off. If you wanna rinse it, because your water should be clean by now, you can do that. But mine didn't have too much. We'll get this guy back to relatively clean. And then we're going to do something similar with the mountains here. So what we'll do is we'll take our light clean brush, we're going to coat it in white, and we're going to cover our mountains again. We're just giving them one more coat so that none of that orange shows through. And so this might seem counterintuitive based on every other painting that we've done, because I always say we do the background first and we work our way to the foreground. But you're going to say, Olivia, the mountains are further back than this kind of snowy foreground. And I agree, but it's kind of difficult to decipher where your mountains are going to sit, how far down you need to bring that color in them, how to place them on your canvas if that ground isn't in there. So what you could do is, if you did your first layer on your ground, if you wanted to do this part of your mountain, if you wanted to do the whole mountain before you put in this purple, you could definitely do that. We're not really going to see this line here where the mountains meet the snow, because we're going to have a lot of trees and stuff in there. If you look, just tried to point to the screen, sorry. if you look over here, this kind of border between the mountain edge and the horizon line is kind of blurred. You don't really see it that much. So don't nitpick your own painting too much on what that edge looks like. I know it's not going to feel right because you're trying to tuck something in behind something that we've already painted, which usually is a no-no. I understand. But we'll be okay for this instance. Not to worry. All right. And so for our mountains here, we don't have any sun or light directly in our painting. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose a dark side and a light side of our mountains. Because we have no direct sun, it doesn't really matter which side it is. If you want your purple on the right side, you can do that. If you want it on the left side, you can do that too. But we want a darker kind of shadowy side and a lighter kind of brighter side. Oops. So what we're going to do is, again, we're going to do light brush, dark brush. So if you have your dark brush still, if you look at mine, it's got all my purple on it still. We're going to keep that purple. You don't need to rinse it, but we're not going to use a lot of paint for this. So just get any excess off. If it has the color on it still, that's fine, but we just want to get any globs off. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do my dark side. I'm going to have it be my left side, like in my painting over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to dip our brush into our paint. We're going to dab a little off, so we're going to have just a little bit. So if you can see, the bristles on my brush are like spread out. There's not enough paint on there that they're all kind of sticking together. And that's what you want. Because if you've ever watched Bob Ross paint a mountain, I don't know if anybody's ever seen that, he does it in one swipe, and it's a mountain somehow. And the key to that is not having a lot of paint on your brush, because the spaces in between the paint on your brush next to the places where the paint does lay down is what's going to make kind of the texture of the mountain. I mean, you could go in there and, you know, make texture by hand, but this is just a really easy way to do it in kind of one swipe. So what we're going to do is, again, we'll take just a little bit of our purple paint here, and we're going to choose whatever dark side of the mountain we want. We're going to come right in the middle. Your brush is going to be upright. Imagine there's a line straight down the mountain here. You're going to go right up to the top, and you're going to kind of go up and down on our mountainside, okay? So wiggle those bristles a little. Doesn't need to be perfect. Maybe I'll go a little bit darker on the top here. And then I want my big mountain to be in front, so I'll continue that to the bottom. And there's half of our mountain. All right. So a light hand with this. You don't want to press too hard because you want those little hiccups in where your brush kind of leaves the page and leaves you those little gaps. So same thing on this mountain. We're going to start at the top. We're going to put our brush down. We're going to drag it over. And there's our second mountain. Okay. And so we're going to do the same thing with our other colors. And so the main color that you want to do with your shadows is the purple. That's what's going to make it look really dimensional. And so I've done the same thing with my orange and with my pink in here. And so again, this is totally up to you. If you like just the way that the purple looks, that's fine. There's not a lot of colors in this painting. I think that's why I chose to do all of the colors on the mountain. But if it seems like too much for you, or if your mountains are very small and you don't have a lot of room in there, then you don't need to do that by any means. But what I'll do is, let me take some of my pink, and maybe on this painting I'll do some pink on the other side just to see what it looks like. And so this guy over here is going to be a little tricky, so we might have to keep the color at the top here. Same technique, not too much paint on your brush here. Alright, something like that. And then we'll come in with a little bit of our orange to finish. And you don't necessarily need to start at the top of your mountain either. So let me we'll take my orange and we'll do some orange in the middle here. What do we think? I think once I step back, and remember, we always want to step back and look at our painting, I think I want the top of this mountain to be a little bit darker so that it really stands out from this background. So what I'll do is I'll just dip, again, my dark brush. I'll go a little bit heavier on this top edge. Maybe I'll do the same over here. Okay, I'm liking that. Let's leave it at that. Okay. So, dark brush in the water. Let's see. We'll go light brush in the water. We're going to let our mountains dry a little bit. And we're going to jump back up to our stars. And so this is where we're going to get that little Northern Lights looking element here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do the same technique that we did to make the stars that are already on there. We're going to tap, or you're going to flick the paint, whatever's going to give you those little specks. But we're going to do something that's going to feel different, again, if you've done this before, because we do want bigger pieces. Like if you've ever done this before and you go like this, your first whack, and you get a glob on there, usually you're like, oh, I didn't want that on there. But we want it on there today, because what we're going to do is we're going to dab kind of a line. We're going to kind of concentrate our little specks a little more for this part. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take a big old dry brush. It doesn't have to be big, I guess, but what I'll say is we're going to take a big crusty dry brush. If you have an old one, it's a good one for this. And all we're going to do is we're going to put it down and we're going to drag it up to all those new little specks that we make. And it's going to give you this kind of Northern Lights look. All right. So I'm going to try to be quick about this because I'm going to put it down. I'm going to do my little taps and then I'm going to lift it up and we're going to see our Northern Lights here. So again, try to concentrate them a little bit in a line. It doesn't have to be a perfect line, but try to get them in a little, give them a little direction. And we don't want too many for this, so let's pause here and see what we look like. So I've just done some of my drops. Mine are pretty liquid, so it's starting to run. So let's do this quick. We'll take this brush. It's dry, there's nothing on here. And I'm going to just rake them up. Straight up, just little brush strokes. Straight up. If you've done a lot of specks and your brush is getting wet, you can dry it off. All right, what do we think? That one was a little bit darker than my other one, or a little bolder, but that's okay. And so the fun thing that you can do about this also is I don't know if you can see too much over here, but if you wanted to employ some of your other colors, so over here I have a little bit of pink in my Northern Lights up here. So what I can do is I can take a little bit of my pink paint, mix it with water like we did with the white, give it some speckles and pull it up and have a little pink. But what I'll do right now is I'll just do little touches here and there of my pink where my white is already sitting. And let's try this. So I'm going to take my same brush and I'm going to rake that pink up that I just kind of laid in. There, and that makes it kind of jump out even more. Because when I think of the well, it's hard for you guys to see, but I've got a little pink in mine. Because when I think of the Northern Lights, I think of colors. They're very colorful. So if you want to add a little bit of color into yours, you certainly can. Most of these Northern Lights areas of the painting are in this kind of up here darker part. So if you've used the purple, the pink, and the orange in this painting, but if you really want like an impact for these Northern Lights, if you want to use some blues, some bright greens, some bright yellows to do just this Northern Lights part, that would contrast really well with that pink and that purple, and then it's going to give you kind of that Northern Lights punchy look. So if you want to do that, that would look really nice too. If you're feeling experimental, you don't need to by any means, but if you're wanting to try something different, if you've done enough of these classes where you're like, Olivia, your paintings are getting boring, I need to do something on my own, you know, take a little chance, and I'd love to see how it comes out. And so let's see, all we have left is our trees. So let's pull out our small brush. And so this can be round, it can be flat, it can be any shape. The only important part is that it is small. The brush that I used over here wasn't quite small enough actually, so I have some kind of globs, but as you can see, when you're at a normal distance from it, you can't really tell. So not to worry about this part. It's gonna seem, it might seem a little hard to do at first because making trees is something that we've definitely done before, but let me zoom in over here. So when you get down to these little areas down here, if you look very closely, they're not trees, they're just little scribbles, little dots of paint. Some of these smaller guys, they're kind of just more triangular shapes. They have kind of the gist of a tree, but really these little tiny ones, it's just dots. So that might feel weird to do, but trust me, it's a perspective thing. If you were looking at a tree miles and miles away, you wouldn't be able to see that it was a tree. It just kind of looks like dark specks, right? So, not to worry. We're gonna do, again, background to foreground here. So take your little brush. We're gonna do just black paint. These trees are just black. And we're gonna start with these little tiny guys in the background. If your paint here, where your mountains are, is very thick, and if it's wet, you might want to take a pause and give it a quick blow dry. We're really just painting over top. We're not like trying to blend anything, so get a good amount of paint on your brush. If it's a little bit wet still, you shouldn't have a problem. But if you need the break, feel free to pause and take that break. And so we're gonna start over here with not the smallest trees, but kind of these in-between guys, just so we can get a feel for it. And so, let me zoom in here. So what we're gonna do is we're going to be creating little triangle shapes, but we're just gonna go back and forth, kind of tapping on the canvas as we go. Kind of just going up, down, up, down, up, down. And it kind of ends up in a tree shape. We're not doing a lot of paint, So again, back and forth, tap, 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 tap. Down here, start at the point, get a little wider as you go down, tap, 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 tap. And we're making trees. Up, down, up, down, up, down. So take a few of these first guys, practice. Up, down, up, down. Some are going to be skinnier than others, some are going to be wider than others, just like they would in real life. So don't be too hard with yourself about these trees. Okay. So we've got the idea down. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start to taper them off in size. So as I come towards this right side of my canvas, what I'm going to do is as I'm tapping, I'm going to be making the trees smaller and smaller. So the guy next to this one is going to be small. We'll do one down here. That's even smaller. And so as we continue on over here, they're going to get smaller and smaller until we almost can't tell what they are. Your dots are going to start to kind of blend into each other, and it's just going to kind of look like a mass eventually. But that's what we want. We want them to look like they're so far away. There's just these tiny little trees here and there. All right, so even there it looks like this is much farther away. These are kind of getting closer because they're getting a little bigger. And that's what we're going for here. All right, and we can do the same now going in the left direction. Maybe we'll start to taper these out a little bit. Just tapping up and down in a rough triangular shape here. Now try not to do what I did. Try not to do them in a straight line here. Maybe I'll make this one a little bigger, so it's not quite in an exact line there. So I'm going right now towards the left side of my canvas. My little trees are getting smaller as I'm going. And try to vary the space in between the trees. You can have like a little cluster, but then, you know, you can have kind of one sitting out on its own. They don't all need to be touching. Okay. Maybe we'll do one down here. So if you've been here before, you know me, I don't know when to stop with the details. And so the cool thing about this painting is that you can do as much or as little of these trees as you want to. If you look over here, I have one little section here, and I have another smaller section down here. If you want to do, you know, a couple of those, you can definitely do that. But I would say with these little trees in the background, don't bring them too far down, because then that's kind of ruin your perspective, because in theory, the lower trees that are going to be up on this front part are going to be closer to us. and the trees that are way back by these mountains are going to be farther, so you want those kind of higher on this land area that we've made. So if you look right here, the trees that are farthest away are kind of at the height of this land that we have on the bottom. These mid-sized trees come down a little bit more into kind of the middle area of this land, and then the bigger trees over here kind of dip down into this darker part. So like I said, it doesn't need to be exact, precise top, middle, bottom. Like if you look, some of these are sitting on the top. This isn't quite all the way down to the bottom, so don't take it, I'll say, too literally, but as a rule of thumb, try to make the ones that are farther in the back a little bit higher on your land, the ones that are wanting to be closer to you a little bit more forward, or a little lower on this land area that we've made, and that will help your perspective a lot. So let's show just a few of these medium-sized ones. So we're going to do the same technique here. I would, just for the sake of time, I would say I would probably do a couple down here, a couple little ones in here, because I just love the way these little trees look. But we'll move on to these medium-sized ones now, and you can kind of fill the space however you see fit. But with these medium-sized trees, we're going to do just the same thing that we did with the small trees. Where we're going to kind of tap our way to a tree. Up, down, up, down. You're going to have gaps in your little branches, but that's how trees look. Right? They're not going to be perfect if they're leaning one certain way. They have a hole in the middle. They're kind of wonky looking. Just keep in mind that not all trees look like Christmas trees. It's okay if they're a little bit different. You can have ones that are a little bit bigger, ones that are a little bit smaller. Not a big deal. Alright, so I'll do a few of my medium-sized trees here. Alright. I'll do one up here. I find that if you want your trees to look more like those big those kind of big pines that you would see in like a forest. Skinnier and taller pines look more forest-like, I would say. Mine are looking more like Christmas trees, they have more of that triangular shape, but if you want them to look a little bit more like they might be out here, just in a snowy field, I would say taller and skinnier might give you a little bit more of that look. You can do some tall, skinny ones, some kind of shorter, fat ones. There's probably going to be a variety wherever you're doing your trees. And so lastly, we'll do one or two of these big guys here. And so you can keep the same brush if you were using a really good brush that you like. It just might take a long time to do a bunch of little tiny dots with a small brush. So if you want to size up for these bigger trees, that's okay. Just remember when you're doing trees, if you've ever done pine trees with me before, I've done a good handful of painting with pine trees in them in my classes with you all. Just remember, don't load up the brush too much with paint. You don't want too much on there because you don't want an area that looks like a shadow. Sometimes when you're doing silhouetted things like these trees are, they can get too blocky and it kind of comes out looking like clip art. So you want some little spaces to exist in between your bristles here. So if you look closer, these have little spaces. You can see the back peeking through pretty much all the way throughout. So resist the urge to fill the whole thing in. You don't want it to end up looking like one of those air fresheners, the tree ones that you hang in your car. So start with just a little paint. You can always add more, but it is hard to take it away, especially when we're doing black on white here. So let me go ahead and move into my big trees here. So very same technique. If you need I'll say a guideline, if you don't want to just start tapping if you feel like it's gonna go crooked or something, I understand. Let me say I'll put one here. I'll make myself a very light guideline. Doesn't have to be perfect or a whole line or anything, but just so you kind of know where you're going. And then from that line, I'll kind of tap out, and if you can see, you can't even see the line once I start getting stuff on there. And even if you can see your line, if you make it a little dark, I mean, trees have trunks, so it won't look unusual if you need, you know, a darker guideline. Not at all. So I'm just taking my brush, I'm going up and down on here. If you have a brush that has a lot of crazy bristles, that's, you know, that's kind of a good one for trees, because it's going to make it look like you put a lot more detail in there by hand than you had to, because the bristles kind of act as the pine needles, right? So you get a lot more value for your time there if you get a brush that's not as smooth. And maybe I'll do one over here. I'll do one that's going off the side over here. I don't know why, but I'm a big fan of throwing things off the edge there. You can see in my other one I have just maybe a quarter of a tree on that one, all the way on that left side. I think that's another one of those things that makes the landscape look very broad if you have things kind of breaking the edge of the page, because then it implies a continuation of the space. It's not just you're looking at something through a perfectly neat edge. It implies that you're looking at a larger landscape. So I kind of like that aspect of it. If you want everything kind of tucked away in more of a picturesque way, then definitely keep them within the bounds of your canvas, but there's no right or wrong here. Wow, that's kind of hard to do when you're sitting sideways. I thought that was straight, but it looks pretty crooked, but that's okay. No big deal. Alright, so I'm going to throw that brush in the water. Ideally, I would probably do more trees than that. I would fill in some of these medium guys. I might do one bigger guy back here just to fill in some space, because I love the way that those trees look. But you can call it however it is if you just want them in the foreground or if you just want them in the background. Again, it's all your preference. The small, medium, and large trees, though, do help kind of that distance. So at this point, even though I didn't do that many trees, you can see that we're dealing with something very, very far away back here, comes up kind of in the middle, and then these big trees in the foreground. So I hope that you all kind of learned a little bit about perspective. If you're painting on your own, feel free to use any of these tips. I would love to advise on any other ways to make your personal paintings better, or even any that we do in the future that have perspective in them. Use any of these little tips and tricks to make your paintings that much better. Even if they're stylized like this one, there are still elements of realism that make them attractive to look at. And that's where little things like this come in. So thank you all for joining me today. As always, send in your paintings if you do them. I love to look at them and see what things you guys have come up with. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I will pay attention when the class is going on, and even after. I check in every once in a while just to see if anybody has questions. Feel free to email me anything about your painting or art, even brushes, paint types, anything like that. If you're wanting to get into it more, if you're kind of taking your painting to that next level, I'd be happy to help. All right, everyone, take care.